Well, hello there, my happy little ramblers, and welcome to Reese Rambles, episode 48. And another week, another ramble. I hope you've all had a enjoyable and rather quiet and uneventful return to work, and no controversies or drama or hundreds of YouTube comments. But yes, the thing that I have been pondering mostly this week, and I'll get straight into it because why not? Previously, I've talked about pipes and tubes and what's the difference between a pipe and a tube. If you're interested in finding that out, you can go back to the previous episodes all about that. And also conduits and ducts also came up in that conversation as well. And we had a real engineer get involved with that, a civil engineer, and he clarified it all for us, and it was all fantastic. So thank you very much, Brian. But there's another peculiar British thing. Well, I suppose pipes and tubes isn't a British thing specifically, but there is a peculiar British thing that's also come up in the same kind of area. And this is something that my wife has pointed out. And when I say in the same kind of area, I mean it's completely unrelated. But what I mean is that the pipe and tube factory debate stemmed from our drive to work, and this particular factory that's opposite the place where we work. And there's another thing that we drive past quite regularly, which is quite bizarre and eyebrow raising, and it's something that we were both aware of originally, I think, but it's something that always gives us a bit of a chuckle when we drive past it. And it's a small local village hall in a village that we drive through. And it would appear that the 1 week every month, one particular day on one particular week every month, they have something called Meat Bingo. And I'll show you some search results for this for the benefit of the viewers out there. Of course, if you're listening, it's hopefully shouldn't be too much of a degraded experience. But yes, basically, Meat Bingo is what you think it is. A load of old people gather in a village hall somewhere, and they all play bingo, and the prizes are all various types of meat. Now, if you've listened to me talk about this previously, about my day job and stuff, you'll know that I do a lot of work for a bacon factory, and they make bacon and gammon, and in that particular group of companies, they make a lot of kind of pork-related products. But as far as I'm aware, they've never actually supplied any prizes to the Meat Bingo. And I must admit, as someone who's never partaken in this peculiarly British activity, it's not something I really know anything about. It's all quite amusing and quite a mystery to me. So I thought I'd mention it. And I actually went onto Google to search for it and try to find some information. And there's not really much out there, to be honest. I guess this is a kind of an older generation thing and something that's not really on the internet. But one thing that is kind of reflected in that is that most of the results are actually Facebook. Particularly if you want to look at video results, because I was trying to find a YouTube video or something that would kind of illustrate what this was all about. But yeah, the video results are all Facebook video, and I'd love to show some to you for the benefit of the YouTube viewers. But as it happens, I don't have a proper Facebook account. I have like a business account that I use to post to my Control-Alt-Reese page. But I actually deleted my personal Facebook account a few years back because my family are annoying. To cut a very long story short, so I wanted to find out a bit more about what Meat Bingo was all about. But then I thought, well, hang on, we've got the Ramblers, we've got this army of people here who have all kind of depth and breadth of life experiences who've probably come across this, and maybe some of you out there have even partaken in it. So I'd love to find out what it's all about. It's interesting to see that the top result the second video result on Google is a Facebook video, as mentioned, and it's actually in Nuneaton, which is quite local to me. So it'd be interesting if I could have a look at that. It says, I can see from the thumbnail, it says every Thursday night at 7 p.m. So evidently giving away a lot of meat. My speculation is that this is something that started during World War II, because this is the UK and a lot of the weird stuff that we do started during World War II for various reasons. And maybe it's a way for butchers to kind of offload meat that's kind of getting towards the end of its palatable life, and a good way for some people who perhaps aren't particularly well off, to put it bluntly, to get their hands on some meat, which is of course traditionally quite expensive. So yes, that's the thought for the week, the opening thought for the week for you to ponder while I go through the rest of the week's news stories. It's Meat Bingo. What is Meat Bingo? Tell me, let me know down in the comments. Thank you. So, as long-term listeners / viewers will be well aware, I'm a huge fan of the Atari 2600 Plus, and yes, I'm holding it up to the camera for the YouTube people. Sorry to keep mentioning the YouTube people. I'll stop it now, I promise. But yes, the Atari 2600 Plus. And I saw a really, really good interview. I say saw, I actually listened to it when I was driving home from work the other day. A really good interview with Ben from PlayOn, who actually pretty much single-handedly developed this thing. And it was over on the Retro Hour podcast. Of course, I'll link to that in the usual places. And it's well worth a listen. And I can't possibly cover all of the stuff that he talked about here. And it's not really fair. It's better for you to go and give them the view or the listen and to kind of hear it directly from the horse's mouth, because he's evidently really, really passionate about his stuff. He's got a really... him and I have very similar backgrounds when it comes to Atari and gaming and all that kind of stuff. And he's just a really interesting guy to listen to, evidently really, really passionate about this, and went through so many different iterations for the hardware and getting the scale right and getting the feel of the joystick right and using the right plastics for things. And it's really, really refreshing to hear in a world of kind of cynical, cheap plastic mini console cash grab things. And he talked about how it's a long-term commitment for Atari, how they're going to be selling this. This isn't just a one-off as like a novelty thing. It's a long-term platform that they're going to be supporting and releasing new games for. Also, they're going to be releasing new features for this in the form of firmware updates. And he even talked about adding things like 1080p support and CRT shaders and some of the stuff that people have requested. And also his thinking about why that wasn't sort of added initially, basically because he wanted the whole thing to be a very authentic experience. It's targeted at people kind of in their 40s and 50s who remember using the original console back in the day and want that kind of authentic tactile experience. Hence also, lack of support for flash carts and ROMs and that kind of stuff. But the interviews, it's about, I think his section's like 40, 50 minutes long. He goes into loads of detail about it. Absolutely fascinating if you have any interest at all in this thing. Just wanted to point that out. And that segues quite nicely into my next story for this week. So Atari, or the company currently calling itself Atari, has announced a mini Atari 400. And this was their original 8-bit computer from 1979. Of course, the 2600, on which the 2600 Plus is based, of course, was their first kind of cartridge-based games console, which was in 1977. I'm tripping over my words here, as always. And their first kind of 8-bit computer was released in 79, and they released the 400 and the 800 alongside each other. The 400 being the cheaper model with a membrane keyboard and a single cartridge slot, and the 800 being, I think it had more RAM as well. The 800 had like a proper mechanical keyboard and 2 cartridge slots, so you could add like expansions and things. Although ultimately the second slot wasn't kind of widely used. There were a few things that use it. So seemingly completely out of the blue and off the back of the 2600 Plus, they've announced the 400 Mini, which completely came out of nowhere. And I think the reason I mentioned the 400 Mini is because it's a bit of a slightly different story. And I'm still trying to put the pieces together here and how this all kind of works, so bear with me. But this is being marketed by Retro Games Limited. Now, Retro Games Limited are known for their other mini computers, particularly like they did a mini, I'm just looking at them here, C64 Mini, a VIC-20, they did a mini A500, the Amiga 500. So, predominantly Commodore stuff. And completely out of the blue, they seem to have partnered with Atari and made a mini Atari 400, which is not unwelcome. And as far as I know, from what I can kind of surmise from this uses the same internals as their other systems, so the A500 and the C64 Mini. Obviously, it's running a different emulator, and it's advertised as being compatible with multiple systems, but ultimately what it boils down to is it's compatible with the 400/800, the XL and the XE range, which hardware-wise are identical pretty much. I know there were some changes to the GTIA, the graphics chip and whatever. And also the 5200 console games, which is quite interesting because I'm a bit of a fan of the 5200 console. And of course, that was based on the same architecture as the 8-bit computers. So yes, very interesting to see. Now, there's no discussion online around Retro Games Limited without mentioning some controversy over recent years, and I want to at least acknowledge this. I don't want to call them out. I don't want to make a big thing about it, but I'm sure if you're familiar with the Rambles, you'll know how I've handled stuff like this in the recent past. But they're quite a litigious company. There was actually a group from Poland last year who announced that they were bringing back the Atari 800 XL. Didn't use the Atari name or branding, of course, but they called it the RM800 XL, and it was based on the design of that machine. Really iconic design. A really, really cool looking thing that these guys were working on. It's got HDMI output and all that kind of stuff. It's got all the same connectivity as the original machine, with the original joystick ports and even the original SIO port, in addition to USB and an SD card slot and all the kind of stuff that you would expect from a modern machine. Even had the original monitor output port on it in case you wanted to plug it into original monitors. I mean, this thing literally covered everything. It was such a kind of a feat of engineering. And if it all came together, it would have been really cool. But they had to shut the whole project down. They got it to the point where it was ready for manufacture. They were advertising it. It wasn't a Kickstarter or any kind of crowdfunded thing. They'd actually sort of funded the development of this thing, as is my understanding. There isn't a huge amount of information out there about this. And it was all ready for production. And then they were hit with a cease and desist from Retro Games Limited, who, of course, have just released the A400. And the A400, is that what they're calling it? No, the 400 Mini. So I'm getting mixed up with the A500 Mini, which was the Amiga thing that they did. And at the time, they actually posted scans of the cease and desist as they'd received it on Twitter. And of course, I will link to these as usual. And from a company called Clinton's, who were acting on behalf of Retro Games Limited, mentioning registered designs. They talked about their clients' rights, including the use of the trademark Atari, which, as far as I could see, they hadn't actually used Atari anywhere on this thing, but and some other stuff. And evidently, there was some speculation at the time off the back of this that this was because Retro Games were working on some kind of 8-bit machine with Atari. And it turns out that that's actually true, and that's kind of why this all happened at the time, which is a real shame because this was just a couple of guys kind of working on a passion project, really, and it looked like a really good product. And ultimately, what they've done is they've kind of used their legal clout to shut down this project, which is a real shame. And something that I just wanted to acknowledge because it was something I very nearly covered at the time, and I was really enthusiastic about this and kind of keen to get my hands on it. And the whole thing just appeared and then disappeared so quickly, and they were very open about the kind of the legal threats and stuff. But the other thing that I need to acknowledge with Retro Games Limited as well, and I will move on to some more positive stuff in a second, I promise. There was an incident with a YouTuber a few years ago. I won't name names or anything like that, but this particular YouTuber was using a character from a Spectrum game in their videos, doing like comedy skits and stuff. And Retro Games Limited actually sent a cease and desist to them as well. And basically, of course, they didn't have the resources to be able to fight it, and ended up having to take a load of videos down and kind of end up losing out on income, and there was a whole stress and everything that came along with that as well. Plus they were involved with the Vega Plus project, which I must admit I don't know much about, but that has its own kind of controversies around it as well. So that's all the controversy stuff out of the way. You'll probably see some of that mentioned down in the comments. And if anyone knows a bit more about that, I would actually quite like to be enlightened on that, because ultimately I'm not really in kind of the Commodore scene. So Retro Games, obviously I'm familiar with them and the products that they make, but it's not something I've really sort of paid a really sort of active interest in. So it'd be cool to kind of get some enlightenment on that before making a purchasing decision about this. I have been told by somebody in the industry that actually they're just the distributor for this. It sounds like they might also be providing the internals for it. But yeah, it'd be interesting to know people's thoughts on that. I've seen very mixed opinions. A lot of people saying that, this was my first computer, I'm definitely going to grab one of these, which is cool. That's very much fair enough. And then equally on the other side, a lot of people saying that they wouldn't touch anything that this company makes with a barge pole. So very polarizing, perhaps unsurprisingly, given that this is the internet in 2024. But hardware-wise, it looks cool. It's got 4 USB ports on the front, where the original 4 joystick ports were on those original Atari machines. Also comes with Mule, which is a 4-player game, and it's an excellent game. It's got 25 games built in. And also, I believe it has an SD card slot as well, so it can actually load games from SD, which is cool. All very good. Kind of a world apart from the 2600 Plus, and a kind of a different experience and a different target market, I guess. The keyboard, as with the other mini consoles that this company makes, isn't functional. To be honest, the original keyboard on the Atari 400 isn't one of its strongest points. So trying to recreate that, doesn't seem like the wisest idea in the world. And also with it being, I mean, this thing's tiny. If you've seen the videos and stuff, compared to the size of the joystick, it's like a little pocket-sized thing, which is cool. I like it. It does look very cool. But of course, it's a development in the world of Atari, and of course, I being so enthusiastic about the 2600 Plus, I just wanted to at least acknowledge this and talk a bit about it because it is on my radar. But it would be interesting to see what people think about it. The games that are included, I have seen some speculation. I've seen some people looking at the captures that they've got on here and the screenshots and stuff and kind of working out which games are included. And there is kind of a partial list on the website. I guess maybe that's not sort of fully finalised yet, or maybe they're not sort of ready to announce the full list yet. But certainly some absolute classics on there, some really good looking stuff, and the ability to add more games as well. So very cool. Funny to see that they're marketing it alongside. They've got a recreated Atari 640 joystick, which of course I should mention first. Apparently this has extra buttons on it. Yes, I see. Because of course the keyboard doesn't work. Now I imagine, like their other consoles, you can plug a USB keyboard into this and use it that way. And of course the games on this system are designed for home computers, so they will, at least to get through like menus and title screens and stuff. A lot of them did use the keyboard in some way or other, if not for the actual gameplay. So they've very cleverly added some extra buttons to the joystick, which I guess will be mapped to particular keyboard keys for particular games to get around that limitation, which is quite clever. Another recreated CX40 joystick. I guess it'll be interesting to see how this feels compared to the 2600 Plus one, knowing the story behind that and all the work that went into getting the feel of that right. But they're also marketing this alongside their gamepad, which is based on the Amiga. I believe it's based on the Amiga CD32 gamepad. And I thought that was quite amusing, just the thought of plugging an Amiga gamepad into an Atari product. But hey, of course, Jay Miner, the father of the Amiga, as he is known, was involved in the design of those original 8-bit Atari machines. So there you go, we've come full circle. But there it is. That's the I nearly call it the A400 Mini again. The Atari 400 Mini, that's out on the 28th of March. I believe PlayOn were also involved somehow. Retro Games are involved somehow. Like I say, I think they provided the guts and they're selling this thing. But yeah, more information on that as it emerges. I wanted to do this as a separate video, but I'm just really, really short on time today. So I thought I'll make it part of the ramble, put the information out there and then move on with it. But yeah, looks cool. So if you're a mover and a shaker in the world of retro gaming, as I am, you'll probably come across a weird Japanese console called the Casio Loopy. And there's been some news about that this week as well. So let's dive straight into that, just because I love the name of this thing. It's a new flash cart, and it's called the Floopy Drive, which is... My hat is off to the person that developed this because it's incredible. It's an incredible name. And basically, this console was originally aimed at girls. It was a Japan-only console. It was very short-lived, made by Casio, of course, the people perhaps better known for watches and other electronics. And they only made, it says here, they only actually made 10 games for this console. That's how short-lived it was and how few they sold. But this thing's really unique because it's got like a built-in printer, and the games actually sort of make use of that and allow you to print stuff out. And like I say, it was aimed at kind of young girls in Japan in the 90s, released in 1995. It's a 16-bit system. And basically there's been a short run of these flash carts, these floopy drives for the Casio Loopy. It's based around the Raspberry Pi RP2040 chip. And it supports like save games and all of that kind of stuff. It says here 11 titles were made for it. I think one of those was kind of an unreleased prototype or something. Not a console I know a huge amount about. I know that my good friend Mr. Johnny Blanchard from Reinfused is quite keen on these, and I think he's even got a full set of those. I'll see if he's got a video on this and see if I can link to it so you can learn a bit more about this console. I believe he has. I seem to remember seeing one. But yeah, the flash cart's $90, which, to be fair, considering it's such an obscure console, is it's not bad, really, especially considering these games for this console sell for hundreds because they were so rare. And yeah, it says here, just reading this on timeextension.com, it's got 32 megabits of flash memory, 1 megabit battery-backed SRAM for save data, USB-C connection for data transfer. And yeah, there it is, the Loopy drive, the first ever flash cart for the Casio Loopy. So if you're a Casio Loopy owner, there you go. That's the thing. Although you're probably already aware of it because I can't imagine there's much going on in the Casio Loopy world today. But cool thing. I like it. So I wanted to talk a little bit about a bit of a phenomenon that's been sweeping YouTube. I like to talk about a good mix of retro gaming stuff and YouTube stuff in my rambles. And yeah, it's YouTubers throwing in the towel, essentially. There's been a lot of announcements, and there have been some in kind of the smaller retro computing community. I'm not going to call anyone out or name any names. But I have seen on Twitter that there are quite a few people who've kind of retired or at least semi-retired recently. Some of them are people who kind of started their channels back in 2020 when the world was a very different place and we had a lot more time on our hands. And they've found over the last 3 years that things kind of haven't grown as they kind of hoped, and just decided that the effort, as far as the reward is concerned, isn't worth the payoff, and that's absolutely fine. I'm not one of those people. I started in 2019 and just happened to sort of catch that as my channel was kind of starting to come up. And I'm certainly around for the long haul. I've literally just put this studio and stuff together. I'd like to still be doing this in years and years' time, to be honest, unless something drastically changes. That's kind of my take on it. But yeah, I'm a big believer in people kind of being honest with their audiences, and if they're not having a good time and they're not finding it a good use of their time, then why not be honest and just say, look, this is a bit of a slog. I'm really sorry, but I can't do this anymore. And some big name YouTubers have recently made announcements along those lines. Some of them are, or most of them are actually kind of semi-retiring. But we'll take a look at this. So this is a channel called Mogul Mail, and this is a guy called Ludwig. Now, he's not retiring. He's made it very clear in this that he's still very much as active as always, if not more so. Looking at this format, it might look familiar to people who are regular viewers of my rambles, and that's because I'm completely honestly say that I borrowed this format from him. I mean, he didn't invent it, but I was watching his updates like this and thought, that's a really easy way to kind of get information out there, and looks like quite a nice workflow. So I'll give that a go myself, and that's basically what turned into the kind of current video-based incarnation of Reese Rambles. And so in here he's talking specifically. I should say actually about Ludwig. He's a qualified journalist. He's known as a Twitch streamer, and he was actually the biggest streamer on the platform at the time. And he kind of a while back he made the jump to YouTube. But he is a qualified journalist, and he's really, really good at this, kind of digging up all of the different bits of information and kind of giving a very sort of well-informed and kind of balanced take on things. So, he does talk about sort of mainstream YouTube stuff and that kind of thing, which if that's not your bag, then that's absolutely fair. But it's kind of how I choose to keep up with this stuff, because he's certainly a lot less annoying than a lot of the other guys doing this. But in this, he talks about some big channels. He's just talking about Tom Scott at the moment, of course, really big popular channel, which I'm sure you're very familiar with. Big Tom Scott fan myself. These channels making announcements that they're retiring, or at least putting things on hold or stepping things down. And basically, he talks about how the platform's kind of reached a kind of maturity, and this whole concept of it being better to burn out than to fade away kind of thing. These people are kind of at the peak of their careers, and they're saying, look, I've made enough money. I've said everything I want to say. I've done everything I want to do creatively. I think it's time to, dial things back, if not disappear completely and do something completely different. And it's a very, it's an interesting phenomenon, because it does seem to be quite widespread at the moment. I just thought it was quite interesting to acknowledge that. Like I say, there are some people kind of in our circles who've done the same recently, very similar announcements. It's just quite interesting to see. And this also ties into something that I talked about last week, and I said I wouldn't touch on this again, but we're going to go back to big camera time just for the big conclusion for this, because there is something that I need to talk about. There has been a development. So yes, last week I talked about David Murray, the 8-bit guy, and I said I wouldn't bring this up again if there wasn't some kind of, unless there was some kind of massive development or breaking news or whatever. And the one thing that I had in mind when I said that was him contacting me directly, because, if he had a say on this, I wanted to kind of put his side forward. And basically what's happened is he has emailed me. He sent me quite a long and detailed email. It was very polite. It was very friendly. He's not arguing with me or ranting at me or anything of the sort. And I do want to make that very clear. It was very kind of cordial, and he does kind of see my point of view on a lot of the points that I raised last week. And I talked a bit about burnout, and that's kind of how it all ties into this. I must say he did also provide some clarification on a couple of points. But by and large, I don't want to go over it all again, and I do still stand by last week's ramble and kind of the way that I tackled it and the angle that I approached it from. And I won't be taking it down or anything like that. And he certainly hasn't asked for that, and he has received it in the way that it was intended. But one thing, I'm not going to show the contents of these emails between myself and him, because there is some quite personal stuff in there. But the one thing that he kind of opened up to me about, really, and I think he was quite pleased that I'd kind of read between the lines and recognised this. It is the whole burnout side of things, and he acknowledged that there has been some sentiment in the community that he's been coasting for a while, and actually that's not the case. He's just massively overcommitted on side projects, and that has been affecting his YouTube output. And also how that burnout has kind of led to some issues with health wise and stuff like that, which it's absolutely not my place to say or to kind of spread that information. It's up to him to sort of talk about the details of that if it comes to it. But I guess what I wanted to say, and the reason I've kind of just hidden this at the end and kind of added it as a bit of a conclusion rather than making a song and dance about it, is that there's a lot of stuff that evidently we won't see eye to eye on, and that's fine. We're different generations, we're from different cultures and different backgrounds, and that's to be expected. But just to have this kind of very sort of frank and open conversation with him, and very very kind of level-headed as well. I still stand by the tone of what I said last week, and it was really good to hear from him. And I guess what I wanted to do was just kind of sort of quite honestly and quite earnestly just wish him all the best with the channel and stuff. And I'm glad he didn't take it as a personal attack, and that certainly isn't the way that it was intended. So it was really good to hear from him, and it does all tie into this kind of YouTuber burnout stuff and the rest of it. But the one thing I would say, if you have a YouTube channel, sorry, I'm stuttering a bit here. If you have a YouTube channel and it's not fun anymore, then perhaps time to consider your options. But he is restructuring things. He wants to focus a lot more on the channel and kind of get his output back up for 2024, which is really good to hear, and kind of deal with some of the stuff that's causing him a lot of stress and a lot of hassle in his personal life. So that's really fantastic to hear. So just wanted to end on that. Really, want it to be a high note rather than some of the drama that we had last week. I need to pop off and go and take my car for its MOT now. It's ancient. It's got 150,000 miles on the clock. I'm not expecting it to pass, but hopefully it won't end up being too expensive and painful for me. But I need to be out the door in the next minute or so. So thank you very much for listening. As always, some interesting stuff to consider this week, and onwards and upwards. Thank you very much. And of course, as always, my happy little ramblers, I shall see you again next time. Bye.